What happens when a leader demands full transparency in public, then sits in the seat of power and suddenly insists the law won't let him deliver? That's not just politics, that's the kind of moment that forces you to ask, was the promise real or was it always theater? The clash between Kash Patel and Congressman Jamie Raskin over the Epstein files wasn't just another heated exchange on Capitol Hill, it was a brutal confrontation between moral certainty and legal reality. And if you stay with me for the next few minutes, you'll see why this hearing left so many people unsettled, not because of what was said, but because of what still hasn't been answered.
Yields back. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, before you joined the FBI, you railed against it for covering up Jeffrey Epstein's human trafficking ring. Let me refresh your memory with this clip.
It has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale? Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
So you finished that December 2023 interview with a challenge to the FBI and harsh words for Republicans in Congress for not getting the Epstein files out to the public. You can see this clip.
Boy pants, and let us know who the pedophiles are.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are, you said. You emphasized that the president and the FBI director each had complete authority to release Epstein's client list. You said Epstein's black book is under the, quote, direct control of the director of the FBI. Look at this clip.
This is way off the topic, but who has Jeffrey Epstein's
black book?
Black book.
FBI.
But who? That is, I mean, there's...
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
All right, so you were sworn in as director more than 200 days ago. Now the black book is under your direct control. So why haven't you released the names of Epstein's co-conspirators in the rape and sex trafficking of young women and girls?
The Rolodex, which is what everybody colloquially refers to as the Black Book, has been released.
Oh, no, you're talking about what the journalist got 5 years ago? No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what you were talking about there, the black book under the direct control of the FBI director.
We have released more material than anyone else before. The Biden administration, Obama administration had the exact opportunities to release this material, and they never did. And if you are telling the men and women of the FBI, we're not going after child predators. Hang on, you said we're not going after child predators. 1,500 child predators arrested this year, 35% increase.
I'll reclaim my time.
4,700 child victims
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to
found.
reclaim my time if you could instruct the witness. Why have you changed your position? There you were saying it's under the direct control of the FBI director and all of it should be released. Why have you changed your position?
Everything that has been lawfully permitted to be released has been released. And as I told you, the investigation was limited. And let me make something crystal clear. I never said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic other people, other women, and they're not other victims. This is the investigation we were given from 2006, 7, and 8, and the search warrants from 2006, 7, and 8. That's what we're working with.
Well, wait, have you released all of the stuff that the FBI has seized from Epstein's house? The computers, the emails, the file cabinets, the documents? What about the financial records? Have you released all of that?
Everything the court has allowed us to release.
Which court are you talking about?
3 separate federal courts have come in and said...
We're talking about the evidence you've got. It's got nothing to do with what those courts have.
Do you have any idea how the law works? Do you want me to break the law in a federal judge's order?
No, I want you to follow your own word, Director Patel. You said up there it was under the direct control of the FBI director. He had the black book.
Everything I have direct control over, we have gone to court. You haven't.
Complete your sentence. Everything you have direct control over, you said.
Have gone to court, and everything we have direct control over.
Complete your sentence. You said everything.
Release. We're releasing.
He'd like to complete his answer.
You began the sentence, everything you have direct control over, and then you stopped that sentence. You've released everything that you have direct control over?
And I have direct control over and can lawfully release. If you're not familiar with the court orders, that's not my fault.
Oh, I'm
perfectly, look at them.
I'm perfectly familiar with them. But how did we prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell?
She was prosecuted with the investigatory material that was collected from 2001 and 2005. Because of the non-prosecution agreements and the court orders on the investigations and search warrants, we were not able to develop new information. And oh, by the way, Jeffrey Epstein was out for 12 years, and the Obama and Biden administration did nothing to look at his work, his pedophile network. If you want to blame me, that's fine. But now you're blaming the men and women who conducted this great search.
Stop that. I'm not blaming anybody other than you. You're not keeping your word. You said that you would release all of the materials under your direct control.
Has anyone released more information on Epstein than I have? Has anyone?
Much more.
Did Comey? Did Ray?
Much more.
Did they?
Excuse me. Much more has come out in the days since the American people and Congress have been demanding it, but it's coming out in dribs and drabs. Why don't you just release the entire file as you promised to do?
I literally just told you, there are multiple federal court orders. I'm not going to break the law to satisfy your curiosity. You didn't join us when we filed court to release the court orders. You could have. You have lawyers. You could have shown up. You didn't do that.
That's a tiny fraction of the material we're talking about.
That is not.
It is a tiny fraction.
How do you know that? Have you seen everything?
It's all misdirection.
How do you know
The time
that?
of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
It started with a simple expectation. Years ago, Patel made his stance clear. The so-called Black Book, a Rolodex filled with names tied to Epstein's network, was under the direct control of the FBI director. His vow? Release it, shine a light on everyone connected, end the secrecy. That wasn't a careful hedged statement. That was an absolute. To victims, advocates, and anyone following the Epstein story, it sounded like a rare promise of radical transparency. Finally, someone was saying out loud what so many demanded: expose the entire network and give the public the truth. But fast forward to this week's hearing, and Patel wasn't repeating that vow. Instead, he leaned hard on legal limits. Raskin pressed him with the same words Patel had once used, almost throwing them back in his face. Why haven't you released the names? Why is the public still in the dark? Patel's answer shifted from moral clarity to legal caution. Everything lawfully releasable, he said, had already been released. Federal court orders, old non-prosecution agreements, and narrow search warrants prevented him from doing more. That might sound reasonable in a legal sense, but in the political theater of a congressional hearing, and in the court of public opinion, it sounded like retreat. Raskin wouldn't let go. He cut through Patel's carefully measured language, pointing out the inconsistency. You once said this material was under your control. Now you say your hands are tied. Which is it? The back and forth became a test of credibility. When a public official makes a sweeping promise, then pivots to legal explanations, people begin to wonder whether those limits are real, or whether they're being used as cover. And that's exactly where Raskin struck hardest. For viewers, the frustration is obvious. The public has seen names, documents, even fragments of Epstein's connections surface in dribs and drabs over the years. A leaked Rolodex here, some flight logs there, a few pages unsealed after media lawsuits, but it's never the full picture. The sense of incompleteness lingers, and that makes every explanation sound suspect. If Patel insists everything lawfully releasable has already been disclosed, why does it still feel like the public is missing the truth? That credibility gap is what fuels speculation, and speculation thrives when trust collapses. Patel's defense leaned heavily on legal walls that to him were immovable. He pointed to multiple federal court orders restricting disclosure. He reminded the room that judges often seal evidence to protect victims' identities, preserve the integrity of grand juries, or shield ongoing investigations. He stressed that the search warrants from the mid-2000s were limited, which meant the evidence base was narrow to begin with. In plain English, if investigators never had broad authority to collect certain material, then later directors can't magically produce it. On paper, that's a strong point, but in the emotional space of this hearing, it landed as cold, bureaucratic, and evasive. And that's the real problem. Most Americans don't think in terms of search warrants and court orders. They think in terms of promises kept or broken. Raskin tapped into that frustration. He reminded Patel that he had once called for transparency without qualification, and now he was the one qualifying it to death. He pushed the moral demand: the victims and the public deserve the full truth. Patel pushed the legal shield: I can't break court orders. Both men were right within their own lanes, but those lanes don't overlap. And that dissonance, moral expectation colliding with legal constraint, is exactly why this exchange resonates so powerfully. There's also a deeper layer here: accountability. Raskin's line of questioning wasn't just about what Patel said in the moment, it was about whether Patel had actually fought as hard as he could have behind the scenes. Court orders exist, yes, but did Patel petition to unseal them? Did he push judges to reconsider outdated restrictions? Did he use every tool available to maximize transparency? Or did he quietly accept the limits and fall back on them as a shield in hearings like this? That's the credibility test. Leaders are judged not just by what they say they can't do, but by how aggressively they try to change those limits. And this is where the hearing took on a darker undertone. Because if Patel didn't fight in court, then his words about transparency start to look less like legal frustration and more like political evasion. For Raskin, the stakes weren't just legal documents, they were trust, consistency, and moral clarity. He wasn't only asking for names, he was asking whether the FBI director had the will to challenge the system for the sake of victims and the public. And Patel's defensive posture, citing prior administrations, pointing to old agreements, shifting blame, made him look less like a reformer and more like another cog in a machine built to protect itself. Now put yourself in the shoes of Epstein's victims. For years they've been told that justice would come, that the truth would be exposed, that powerful people connected to Epstein would face accountability. And yet hearing after hearing, document after document, it feels like the full picture never arrives. For those survivors, Patel's words aren't just legal arguments, they're another reminder that institutions are slow, careful, and often unwilling to push boundaries. When he cites court orders, they hear excuses. When he points to old investigations, they hear abandonment. And when Raskin demands clarity, they hear the echo of their own unanswered questions. That's why this hearing wasn't really about one director or one congressman, it was about the credibility of institutions. If leaders publicly promise transparency and later hide behind technicalities, public faith erodes, and when the issue is as explosive as Epstein's network, a scandal touching wealth, power, and exploitation, the demand for full disclosure only grows louder. The public doesn't just want fragments, they want everything. They want names, documents, emails, financial records, and the entire picture. Anything less fuels suspicion that the system is protecting the powerful instead of exposing them. So what should we take from this? First, recognize the clash for what it is. Raskin spoke in the language of moral obligation, Patel answered in the language of legal constraint. Those registers don't line up, and that's why their exchange felt so raw. Second, accountability requires more than citing the law. It requires showing your work. If Patel and the FBI have truly pushed courts to unseal records, then let the public see those filings. Show the motions, show the rulings, show the resistance. Transparency isn't just about releasing names, it's about proving you fought to release them. Third, remember that transparency isn't binary, it's a process. Promising full release is easy, navigating legal barriers is hard, but leaders earn credibility by showing exactly how they tried to bridge that gap. In the end, this hearing left a haunting question: whose side is leadership really on? The victims who demand dignity and clarity, or the institutions that prefer control and caution? Patel's answers may have been legally defensible, but they weren't emotionally satisfying. And in the court of public opinion, that distinction matters. Because when the camera cuts between a director invoking court orders and a congressman demanding names, viewers aren't thinking about legal nuances. They're asking a simpler, harsher question: are we being protected from predators, or are predators being protected from us? This isn't the last time we'll see this clash. The pressure for transparency around Epstein's files will only grow. Victims will continue to demand closure. Lawmakers will continue to press for names. And every time new fragments surface, the frustration will deepen. The real test for Patel and the FBI isn't whether they can recite court orders in hearings. It's whether they can prove to the public that they've done everything possible to tear down unjustified secrecy. Until that happens, suspicion will linger, and promises of transparency will sound hollow. So let me leave you with this: was Patel's account in that hearing the truth of an institution bound by law, or the performance of a leader shielding himself behind convenient legal walls? That's the question only you can answer. Because transparency in a democracy doesn't come from court orders alone. It comes from public pressure, from people like you who demand to see what's hidden. If you care about accountability, justice for victims, and real transparency, don't let this issue fade. Share this breakdown with others, start conversations about it, and keep the pressure on your representatives to press for court filings and litigation records that show whether every avenue for disclosure has truly been exhausted. Because public demand is the only force strong enough to turn promises into action. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Patel has done everything he could to unseal the files, or is this all just a convenient legal shield? Your voice matters, and together, public pressure is how secrecy gives way to truth.